Okay, so you're over 50 and you're looking forward to a long and healthy life, the next half of your life. But there's two critical things that you've got to pay attention to if you're going to have that long and healthy life. Hi, I'm Greg Diamond, physiotherapist, have been a physiotherapist for over 40 years now. Health and well-being is my bag. It's what I love, it's what I look forward to doing and communicating to people. So I hope you find this information useful. What is the information? Look, when I worked originally in public hospitals, one of the things we dreaded, particularly on the orthopedic ward, were the older patients who came in having fallen and broken their hip. Why? Because the statistics clearly show that when an older person breaks their hip and requires surgery and rehabilitation, about 30% of them in 12 months' time are likely to die. So there is a high risk when you break your bones, particularly those bones of the pelvis and leg. Most of them were women, not all, but most of them were women. So there was something going on. And we thought at the time that older women were weak, they stumbled and fell and broke their bones. We have a clearer understanding now that some of those people broke their bones first and then fell. So it wasn't falling and breaking bones, it was breaking bones and then falling, which makes sense. So how do you stop that happening? We call that, by the way, osteoporosis. But what happens before osteoporosis? It's a thing called osteopenia. Now, we're not talking about your genitalia here. What does penia mean? It means lack of. So osteopenia means a lack of bone. What does sarcopenia mean? This might be a term that's a bit unfamiliar to you, but a sarcomere is the basic cellular block of the muscle. So when you have a sarcopenia, you have a lack of muscle. So these two critical factors come into play as we age. And if you're over 50, please pay attention because this is really, really important. If you've got a lack of bone and a lack of muscle, the increase of all forms of mortality rises dramatically in the years ahead. So how do we sort this out? How do we go into our older years knowing that we've got enough bone and enough muscle? First of all, sometimes it relates to our hormonal levels and it's worth getting checked. See your doctor, see your physician, get your hormone levels checked out because that can have a significant effect on both muscle and bone. So if your hormones are driving you there, that's something that has to be attended to by your physician. But let's assume that's all equalized. Where do we go from there? First stop is exercise. We used to say, you got to do weight-bearing exercises. Why? Because bone, like all your tissues, gets stronger when you have stress applied because it has to adapt to that stress. Obviously, sometimes there's too much stress. That's when a bone breaks or bruises. But we're talking about an appropriate amount of stress that's going to cause the bone through that challenge to get stronger. So it's interesting, with astronauts, one of the problems that astronauts have when they go into space for a long period of time is that there's no stress acting on their bone, no stress force acting particularly on their musculature, and so they lose both bone and muscle. So when they come back to Earth after a prolonged time in space, you sometimes will see them being helped off those, sometimes in wheelchairs. Why? Because their bones are so brittle that they could, if they stumbled and fell at that stage, they could do themselves a serious injury. So they have to gradually build up again over time as they rehabilitate from their time in space. So doing exercise that is what we would say now is, rather than weight bearing, load bearing. Now, what do I mean by that? When you apply load to the bone, and that can be weight, it can be gravity, the force of gravity, but it also can mean doing resistance exercise. Why? Because when you have a muscle and it has at the end two tendinous attachments to bone, so when you tense your muscle, you apply tension vicariously to the bone itself. So the bone has to respond to that tension. And so it gets stronger through load bearing, not only the load of gravity, but the load you apply to it through resistance, through weight. And the other side of the exercise equation, of course, is your VO2 max. This is your, if you like, your aerobic fitness, the efficiency at which you are delivering oxygen to your tissues, the amount you breathe in, then how it gets through your lungs, into your circulatory system, and then how it's delivered. That is a measure of your fitness, or your VO2 max, your maximum efficiency using oxygen. All, of course, is assisted by and improved by exercise. And your bone and your muscle are two tissues that certainly require oxygen to be healthy and continue working well. So, having said that, we've got exercise for both muscle strength. Again, when I was working in hospital, we knew as physiotherapists that we had to get activity into the reclined person, into the person in bed very quickly. If they were compass and awake, we would give them exercises to do in bed. If they had hip surgery, knee surgery, you had to get them out of bed as soon as possible. Why? Because we knew that 24 hours lying in bed, not being active, you start to lose muscle tissue. Literally, the muscle cells up and die on you. And guess what? Muscle, except in very weird circumstances, does not replicate. You don't get that cell back. Your muscle cells don't keep reproducing themselves. Now, what you can do is you can always build the muscle that remains. You can hypertrophy it. You can build that muscle size, that muscle cell size up, so you build the muscle up. So you can regain strength, but you start losing muscle very quickly when you don't use it. So through exercise, you've got to use your musculature. So exercise both prevents osteopenia and exercise prevents sarcopenia, the loss of muscle. So exercise, vitally important. The other thing that happens as we age is that the research shows that as people age, they tend to drop their protein intake. Now, protein is, as we know, is made up of amino acids. So really we're talking about amino acid supply. Now, every tissue in your body is pretty much made up by amino acids. They're the building blocks of all your tissue. So if you haven't got enough amino acid, and we don't make them ourselves, we purely get it through our diet. If you are dropping the level of good amino acids, that good source of protein down, then you're not providing yourself with the building blocks that you need to maintain, let alone build, extra bone and muscle. So my advice to you would be to maintain a very good protein intake as you get older. What happens as we get older is people get a bit lazy, people start not to care so much about their diet. Look, maybe in particularly older people who have lost partners, etc., sometimes the inclination to sit down for a meal is not there. They lose interest in eating. So they go for the quick and easy, which is often carbs or processed foods. They are not supplying you with these building blocks, or enough of these building blocks. And again, you can see it, can't you, in older people that start to lose muscle, they shrink down. You literally see them shrinking, both in height and width. So we want to maintain good protein intake. Now, personally, I seek that through a lot of animal source. That might be against some other people's ethical philosophy. So you can do it in a vegan or vegetarian diet. It's just a bit harder. You've got to work harder at doing it. But whatever your source is, it needs to be regular. It needs to be complete, because remember, there's essential amino acids that you have to have so your tissues stay healthy. And good sources of protein, for me that's animal-based, are the building blocks that will keep those tissues healthy. So don't drop your protein intake. If anything, increase your protein intake. And you're looking at what they say about 1.5 grams per kilo, no, probably about 2 grams per kilo of body weight. I'm not sure what that is in pounds, but you can work it out. So diet, attitude. This is really interesting. Again, as people get older, their attitude to exercise tends to change. Not just the attitude to exercise, but attitude to everything, every challenge in life. People get more comfort orientated, dare I say it. People like not to get stressed in all sorts of ways. You know, they don't like to be too hot, they don't like to be too cold, they don't like to be too hungry, they don't like to have the stress of exercise when it's uncomfortable. And so these levels of challenge start to drop, but that has a really adverse effect on our health and on our psyche. When we stop challenging ourselves, both mentally and bodily, we suffer loss. If you stop challenging yourself from an exercise perspective, from having that element of stress where you push yourself beyond where you're comfortable, you are not going to get the gains to bone and muscle that you seek. It's the same with your brain. If you don't stress your brain enough, you don't push your brain, if you don't challenge your brain enough, then you will lose brain cells and you won't have the brain function that you're seeking as well. Interesting, by the way, exercise has a really positive effect on brain function. So you're not only doing this for your body, you're doing this for your brain, but we're concentrating on bone and muscle at this point in time. So attitude, you've got to become comfortable with being uncomfortable as you get older, and don't give in to those signals to be comfortable. So challenge your body, challenge your brain, don't seek comfort. I hope this has been helpful. I hope that you are seeking to go forward in this second half of your life with joy, with living life to the full, with having every possibility and promise open to you, because you're healthy and you're well and you can continue to explore life as it's presented to you. So if you like that, please follow, subscribe, even drop a comment. There's some great books that I've got listed below too, particularly Outlive by Dr. Peter Attia, if you want to gain more insight into the way your body's working and how to move yourself forward in this latter stage of your life. Catch you later.